Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. I'm grateful to be here with all of you today. And we are continuing our discussion of the overview of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 8. And today we'll be discussing text 22. This is share the screen here. Ye deha bhajas triguna pradhana gunan vipashyanti utava tamascha yanmaya mohit chetasastvam vidusva samstham na bahi prakashaha. So here, this is a prayer being offered to Lord Kapila by Amshuman. My Lord, you are fully situated in everyone's heart, but the living entities covered by the material body cannot see you, for they are influenced by the external energy conducted by the three modes of material nature. Their intelligence being covered by Sattva-guna, Rajoguna and Tamoguna, they can see only the actions and reactions of the three modes of material nature. Because of the actions and reactions of the modes of ignorance, whether the living entities are awake or asleep, they can see only the workings of material nature. They cannot see your Lordship. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Unless one is situated in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, one is unable to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is situated in everyone's heart. However, because the conditioned souls are influenced by material nature, they can see only the actions and reactions of material nature, but not the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One therefore must purify himself internally and externally. Apavitraha pavitro va sarva avastham gatopi va yah smaret pundari kaksham sahayabhyantaraha shuchihi. To keep ourselves externally clean, we should bathe 3 times daily. And for internal cleanliness, we must cleanse the heart by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. The members of the Krishna consciousness movement must always follow this principle. Bahayabhyantara shuchihi. Then it will one day be possible to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. So here we continue our discussion on this chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and I'll do a quick overview of what we've discussed, and then we'll come back to where we left off yesterday. So in this chapter, broadly speaking, the dynasties in the Raghuvamsha, in the solar lineage where Lord Ram will appear, are being described. So initially, Bahuka, the king, faces persecution and impoverishment. But from that adversity, his son Sagar is born and he rises to prosperity despite an attempt to kill him in his womb itself, while he's in the womb itself. Then, and it is Kovais who try that, but then Sagar rises to poverty. But then we are discussing this point where Sagar's sons, because they grow up in prosperity, they develop some arrogance. And with that arrogance, when they find that the horse which was stolen by Indra is tied next to where Kapil Muni is, they think that it's Kapil Muni who is culpable. And that is at one level due to Indra's mischievousness, his deviousness, but is also due to their own presumptuousness. And the result of their presumptuousness is that they end up trying to attack Kapil Muni. And this is the point I was making yesterday, that when somebody offends great souls, somebody is arrogant, then when they offend, it is not that the offended has to destroy them. The offense itself can destroy them. And here their problem was presumptuousness. No, so the presumptuousness means that they think I know the answer. So last time I mentioned how the most dangerous jumping is jumping to conclusions. That the most we all jump, some jumps have different levels of danger, but jumping to conclusions is extremely dangerous. And it is usually a sign of arrogance to jump to conclusions, because humility is not just offering obeisances when somebody comes, addressing people as Prabhu, but humility also means avoiding snap judgments. Humility means understanding that I need to understand the situation. So a person is humble when they enter into a place, even if they are in authority position and they have to deal with the situation, but they want to hear and understand what the situation is. But arrogance thinks that I know what's wrong and I know how to fix it. Now both of these are dangerous. First of all, we may ourselves not have diagnosed what is the problem, and we may give a wrong prescription. So just as medical mistakes can have devastating consequences for the patients, same can applies to other situations also, other settings also. In this case, for people who who are in position of power and whose assessments, whose judgments can matter a lot in terms of who all are affected by that. Now, another aspect of humility, why do I need to understand the situation? Because I am finite and fallible. Finite means there's only so much I can know. And fallible means even in what I can know, I tend to commit mistakes. So if we consider our 4 defects, the tendency, we have limited senses, then we have tendency to be illusioned, we commit mistakes, and then the cheating propensity. Out of these 4, to a large extent, it's only the 4th that is in our control. We can't suddenly start hearing supersonic sound vibrations. We can't see in darkness. So the limitation of the senses, we can't do much about it. And then beyond that, there are certain illusions which will come upon us. We can try to get education, but a mirage will appear like water to us when we are in desert. We can't change it. And then we need to be careful, but we'll all commit mistakes. But relatively speaking, if you see from the first defect to the last defect, over the first defect, we have no control. And the last defect, we have maximum control. So humility means we are aware of our defects, our fallibilities, and therefore I understand that I need to carefully consider, why is this happening? What is the explanation for this? Our mind may give immediately an explanation. Oh, this is what has happened over here. If somebody comes late for a meeting which we have with them, one conclusion could be that they are irresponsible, or they disrespect me. This is the deliberate way, by keeping me waiting, they are showing that how they disrespect me. It could be like that, but it could become something entirely innocuous. Maybe they were caught in a severe unexpected traffic. Maybe they met with an accident. Maybe there's a family emergency. So humility doesn't jump to conclusions. It tries to find the facts. Whereas arrogance, what it does is, I am so powerful, I am so clever. And this is unfortunately related that many people who have gained some power somehow or the other, they automatically presume that they are clever. So because I am powerful and clever, I can figure things out without needing anyone to explain them to me. So yes, some people can be sharper than others. Some people can process things fast. They can evaluate things quickly. And that's good to have that skill. But there's a difference between confidence and overconfidence. And that difference essentially centers on vigilance, awareness. As I mentioned, arrogance is the more we overestimate our power, the more we undermine our prospects. Prospects means what we are likely to do, what we are likely to get. So it is good to be confident if we have certain abilities. It's good, but difference between confidence and overconfidence is vigilance. Vigilance means observing carefully what exactly is happening. If we are not vigilant, somebody might be a very expert in a particular field. Somebody might be very expert police person and they're expert shooter, and they see somebody who's running away from a scene, and this is a criminal, I can shoot this person, and they have the expertise to shoot. But just because somebody is running away from a crime center, does that automatically make them a criminal? Or maybe they are not, they're running away because they are criminals, maybe they are running away from a criminal, we don't know. So vigilance is required. So what happens over here is that sons of Sagara, they are presumptuous, they are arrogant, and their arrogance comes in, they think that they will punish Kapila. Now Kapil Muni at that time was peacefully meditating, and the horse was nearby. If their purpose had been to take the horse, they could have taken the horse. Kapil Muni was not opposing it. Now what kind of thief would just peacefully sit and meditate and keep a stolen object right next to them in public view for everyone to see? In one sense, like, quite often we can say that when some explanation of problem seems to be too obvious, then maybe it is not true. Because even if sometimes people do something wrong, most people are not so foolish as to do something wrong in an openly visible way. So I was at one mediation, and one devotee was accusing, you did this because you wanted to defame me. And the other devotee said, see, you know me very well. And I was wondering what is devotee. Sometimes in mediations, all kinds of psychologies we encounter. He says that, you know me very well, and I know you very well. He says, I know that you will suspect that I will try to defame you, but I didn't think that you would suspect that if ever I tried to defame you, I would do it in such a stupid way. I would defame you in such a way that I would not get caught by it. So that was funny. So he said, I'm not insulted by your accusation that I'm trying to defame you. I'm insulted that you think that I would defame you in such a stupid way. It was ridiculous. So anyway, the point is that Kapila, if he's doing something like this, why would he just sit and meditate and keep the horse in full view? So they could have thought a little bit, but they didn't. They tried to attack Kapila, and then because of that, their own body got burnt. Body got burned because that was the consequence of their own wrongdoing. Now, in the Bhagavatam, there are many mystical events that are described. And sometimes because of these mystical events, we may find the Bhagavatam a little bit difficult to relate to. Now, how does this happen basically? We may say that, so mystical events. So the point is that even if the specifics of the events are mystical, the principles they illustrate are universal. What that means is, say for example, in the Ramayana, there's a description that Ravan had 10 heads. And now you say, how can a being have 10 heads? Well, okay, the point is, although he had 10 heads, but when he was consumed by lust, when lust conquered his consciousness, then although he had 10 heads, he was left with 0 brains. He was left with 0 brains. And that's why he did something so stupid as to abduct the wife of the person. Even if he didn't accept Ram as the supreme being, what did he do? He saw that Ram had single-handedly killed 14,000 of his warriors, including his 2 brothers Karan Dushan, and still he tried to antagonize him, even though he was warned before that. So the point is, the specifics, yes, we can go into how the specifics may have happened, but the more important that there are universal principles that are to be learned. And those universal principles, so they are what are critical. So here the universal, now how did somebody get burned just because they were trying to attack a great sage? Yes, we could go into the principles of yoga and other things, how there is a fire inside the human body, and that fire can be elevated by the super soul within the heart, or that fire can be elevated because of karmic reactions. There could be various mechanisms in which we can go into how a particular thing can happen. But more important than the meaning of, let me put it this way, more important than the literal meaning of the stories is the meaning that those stories bring into our life. That means that they help us understand. Okay, they teach us some values for our life. They bring meaning. Okay, this is how I should be acting, this is how I should not be acting. Now, I'm not saying the literal meaning, the meaning not to be considered, but there are ways in which that can be understood, and that's an obstacle. And we needn't let that become an obstacle for us. The principle here is that how dangerous jumping to conclusions is, how dangerous attacking saintly people is, and more important, most foundationally, most universally, how arrogance is self-destructive. So now after this, we go to this is the part about this Sagar's sons who get killed. Now there is this now described that Sagar has another son through another wife. His name is Asamanjas. And his Asamanjas is a peculiar kind of person. He is a person, he's described both sides. He sometimes gets very violent and he does all kinds of crazy things, but he's also very powerful. And because he sometimes gets violent, so his father drives him away. And when his father drives him away from the kingdom, then in a fit of anger, where he wants to show his father what he is losing, what he has lost by driving him away, so he actually uses his mystic powers, and he gets, so he's a misdirected genius. He uses his mystic powers, and these the previous members of the dynasty, the sons who have died, he brings them back to life and demonstrates that. And the citizens are stunned by that. And his father, he says, what's happening? How did this happen? But then the son goes away, and it's not clearly described in the Bhagavatam, but it does seem from the overall narrative that bringing back to life is not permanent. That is simply to demonstrate, this is what I can do, but because you drew me away from here, so I'm going and you lose all this. So this is an indication of how there can be people, sometimes they have a lot of power. He has power but no restraint. You could put another way is that there is inner power and there is outer power. So inner power is it's not just the capacity to restrain our desires, it's also to behave in a way that is generally expected in society. So every society has certain norms, and every society expects people to behave in particular ways. So inner power, we could say, is the power to, on one side, discipline oneself, the other side is to conform to social norms, and outer power is to get things done. So the most effective, the most transformational is when a person has inner power and outer power both. So this is most transformational in benefiting others and oneself. What happens by this is that a person can actually, because of the discipline, they can elevate themselves, and because they have outer power, they can do a lot of good to others. And this is the best place to be in. If we want to be agents of change, we change internally and we try to change externally. So inner power and outer power. If somebody has, so outer power can be financial power, it can be oratory power, it can be organizational power, it can be charisma, it can be many things which can be specific abilities that a person has. So whatever way the outer power might be. So here Asamanjas had extraordinary outer power. Now, if there is only inner power but not much outer power, the person will benefit themselves because they are living a regulated life, but they may not be of much benefit to others because of the fact that they are because of the fact that they are actually not having inner restraint. On the other hand, if there are no inner power, no outer power, they may hurt themselves, but it won't be much. Now, if you consider the major problems of the world that they are facing today, if you consider the environmental crisis that we are facing, now that is not caused by some poor, illiterate farmers who are doing some farming. The major problems of the world are caused by, say, very educated, intelligent, resourceful people who developed phenomenal technology without considering its consequences or without realizing what its consequences would be. So the point is, if one doesn't have outer power, they can't hurt anyone much. So now if somebody has outer power but no inner power, does that mean they will always be destructive? Yes, they can be destructive. But then when we say there's no inner power, that basically means that they don't have much control over their mind. Now our mind can sometimes act as our enemy. Sometimes our mind can act as a friend. Sometimes the mind comes up with good ideas, and sometimes with bad ideas. So depending on the mood of the mind, then they can do a lot of good, and sometimes the mood of the mind, they can do some very bad things. So we all probably know some people who are moody. That when they are moody, then it's how they will respond to a particular request or a particular idea. It depends not on any principles. It depends largely on their moods. So if we approach them at the wrong time, even the best idea will be destroyed by them. And if you approach them at the right time, even a small suggestion we will get appreciation, we'll get encouragement, and they'll accept it. So generally, when people lack inner power, it doesn't always mean that they are bad people. Sometimes some people can be, but it just means that they can't conform to a particular level of social behavior. They may not be able to follow a particular level of discipline. In mainstream society, such people are called as non-conformists. And now in many top organizations, Fortune 500 companies and others, there are places where people are extremely, what is the word? That they have regulated structures and they regulate performance, but they are also some people who just can't stick to a schedule. They may be genius in their own way, and sometimes they are given space. They are given no deadlines, no work routines, but just come up with a new idea that can change the whole world, that can change the field of technology. And such people may do that. So in general, if we have to look at this situation, if somebody is a non-conformist, now why are they being a non-conformist? That is important to understand. Is it because the best possibility could be that their creativity and energy is hampered by conformity? Everybody has to do like this. So on the other hand, it could be that the other extreme could be that they are selfish and vicious, and they don't conform because they want to be disruptive and destructive. And the middle possibility could be they just lack the discipline to conform. Now, one of my friends, a devotee's son who has become quite friendly with me, told me he's a brilliant. His IQ would be probably among the top 5% in the world. So he told me that he's got special permission from his school principal that when he attends classes in his school, he can simultaneously play video games. Now he say, won't it be distracting? He says that now, of course, he doesn't like to simply auto theft or something like. He plays word games, some intellectual games. He says that just because the class is normally spoken at the intellectual level of the average students, and his intellectual level is so high that he gets bored during the class. And he says that when I'm doing that, I'm playing that game, my intelligence is sufficiently engaged, and I can focus more on the class at that time. So psychologists call this phenomena as constructive distraction. Constructive distraction. That some amount of distraction helps people in concentration. So for some people, non-conformity is not because they are undisciplined, but because just they have some extraordinary levels of capacity. So then such people, if they are told, you cannot do this, this is the way things are to be done, they just get alienated, they get lost. And in in general, religious traditions often have a lot of difficulty with non-conformists. Mhm. But why somebody is not conforming, that is important to understand. So they lack form. So that is, maybe they have particular situation, but they have they had a particular kind of upbringing, they had a particular kind of psychology. Because this is the way things are done. I just can't do them this way. Well, okay, maybe they have to give them some space and they can do things their way within limits. But sometimes some people are just selfish and vicious. Say somebody, say for example, some children, they just can't sit silent in class. Now, why is that? Because there's so much energy within them, they're restless. Some children can't sit silent in class because they have no interest in the class and they want to interfere with anybody who has interest in the class also. So why somebody is doing something which is not right, which is not the standard, that has to be carefully understood. So in general, it is, in one sense, the theme that is going on here is something similar, that the sons of Sagar judged Kapila and they got into trouble because of that. And Sagar himself judged Asamanjas. And then he had some regret. The consequence is not as catastrophic. Nobody was killed because of that, but that also had its consequences. So a similar thread of thought is going through there. That so these two characters judge and they get into trouble. And then we have when Anshuman goes again to Kapila Muni, he sees over there and the horse is still there. See, Kapila Muni has got nothing to do with the horse. He is meditating and he's happy meditating. And Anshuman decides to uh, complete the work that his father has, that his parents had started, or his grandfather wanted to be done, and he comes there. So that is where we come in this chapter now, where actually Anshuman comes and starts offering prayers. Now, when he offers prayers, what happens is that he offers prayers to Kapila and he recognizes Kapila's position, and the rectification of the situation happens relatively very easily. See, he offered prayers and he said, "This is the horse. Take it." Kapila had nothing to. Kapila had nothing to do with the horse. He didn't want to keep the horse, but the sons of Sagar were lost. They couldn't be returned so easily. So, often what happens is that, so sometimes we make a mistake or some mistake happens, and then in response we commit a second mistake. And that first mistake is not that difficult to resolve, but the second mistake that makes things much, much more difficult. So the second mistake is where sometimes you try to cover up the first mistake. So this is again going back to the earlier point that I mentioned, that among our 4 defects, so if you consider the 4 defects, so the last defect, cheating propensity, that makes the effects of the other defects much worse. So it's interesting, we have effects of defects. So every defect has its effect, but how much will be the effect? So when a mistake is made and we try to cover up the mistake, we often let the mistake fester, we let the mistake grow. So sometimes they're saying that problems covered are problems doubled. So what happens is, we have to, anyway the problem is there and we have to deal with it, but then we try to cover it up and we have to deal with all that we didn't try to cover up the problem. So we have to keep our story right. Okay, I told this at this place, I told this at this place. So this cheating propensity is what makes things worse. So otherwise the sons of Sagar didn't have to die. They had come for the horse, they could have talked with Kapila Muni and they could have taken the horse back, but unfortunately they didn't do that. And now when we see Anshuman is offering prayers to Sagar, to Kapila Muni, so this particular verse was about the prayer that he offers. So he is talking about the 3 modes of material nature and how the modes cover us up. So it's interesting, this point of analysis, that how do the three modes and four defects relate with each other. So we have the four defects which we can't do much about, but the three modes compound the effects of the four defects. So let's look at this a little bit more in detail. The three modes and four defects. So in general, what do the modes do? We could say that in Krishna talks about three modes of material nature, and he says goodness, there is reflection before action. So Krishna talks about it, says prakasha, prakasham cha pravrittim cha moham eva cha pandava. So we think, and what this means is that this acting in goodness, it decreases the likelihood of the four defects of the defects controlling us. Because if you're not even aware of what we are doing, we might jump to a conclusion, we might commit a mistake, we might give in to our illusions, affecting us adversely, we could say. So now goodness, that's the advantage of functioning in goodness. Even a person in goodness will have the four defects, but because they're more aware, a person in goodness will not jump to conclusions. A person will think, before I speak some words condemning someone for something wrong that I think they have done, I'll check my thinking. Did they actually do something wrong? And we'll check that. On the other hand, what happens in the mode of passion? There is action before reflection. So this is Krishna talks in the Bhagavad Gita as pravritti. Pravritti means we have an inclination to act and we just get impelled to act immediately. It's the urge to act is so strong that most people just can't resist that urge. They have to act. So that is pravritti. And now what happens is, when it is like this, so the possibility is, if we are acting in an area that we are good at, so it's quite possible that we may arrive at a good judgment. So if I'm expert in a particular field, and then say there's an expert firefighter, and the firefighter sees a fire and they say, okay, this is the fire is coming over, let's attack the fire from here, and they run in that direction, and then they do the right thing. So it's possible that not all times reflection is possible or reflection is necessary. So within psychology there are two words. There are instincts and there are impulses. So we could say instincts are like programmed intelligence, and impulses are, you could say, anti-intelligence. So when we have impulses, we may overeat, we may yell, we may do various things which are unhealthy. Instincts means we do the right thing without thinking. So when we are in passion and we act as per our instincts, we may do something good. So it's not that always action without reflection is bad. Life is sometimes so fast that we may have to sometimes act without reflection. But when we give in to our impulses, the results are going to be bad. So bad means what? Our four defects come into play and we make mistakes. See, going back to the earlier example of, say, we have a tendency to be illusioned. So we have imperfect senses and we have a tendency to be illusioned. So somebody who has never been to a desert and they're desperately thirsty and they see some water over there. Now the road may be like this and the water may be over here. And they run toward it and then they find it's a mirage. And then they lose that much energy, they lose that much time, and they are that much further away from the oasis. On the other hand, somebody who is very seasoned, they have been spent a lot of time in the desert and they know how to discern which is actually a mirage and which is the oasis. And they are, this is oasis, let's go there. And they actually are able to judge properly. So some people may be able to discern because of expertise, because of experience. So action and passion is, it would be great if we could always act in goodness, but sometimes the reality of life is that we can't always act in goodness. But if we are aware that, see, if we are good at some things, then even if we don't act in goodness, we will do something good in that area. But if you're already bad at something, then if we don't act in goodness, we are much more likely to commit mistakes. So, and then lastly, this verse talks, lastly, we talk about ignorance. So ignorance, Krishna talks about as aprakasho apravrittischa, no reflection, no action. Is only illusion, moha evacha. Aprakasho apravrittischa pramado moha evacha. So in ignorance, what happens is sometimes a person doesn't even understand that a mistake has been committed, leave alone rectify the mistake. So sometimes, some people just do something terrible, they speak something terrible, and then somebody else gets angry with them, and then they ask, somebody asks, how could you do this? And then they're questioning, what did I do? What did I do? They are not even aware because they just illusion completely. So I sometimes explain the three modes as, some people make things happen, some people watch things happen, and some people wonder what happened. Some people wonder what happened. Those are people in the mode of ignorance. So they are just so caught in their own, in the ideas and illusions and the things going on in their head, and they're not aware of anything. So then the four defects get compounded in the mode of ignorance. In the mode of ignorance, we don't perceive things properly, we don't analyze things properly, just caught in our head, and then whatever we do, that usually ends up making things much worse. So in general, in human society, if not everybody may become a devotee, but just by coming in contact with devotees and by various means, if people could just come to a little more to the mode of goodness, the human society would be much better. Unfortunately, in today's world, there are so many forces which systematically drag us toward ignorance. What they do is, especially we consider the the whole idea of advertising, is to make us act without thinking, to trigger our emotions and to make us act without thinking. And then there is distractions. We have so many distractions. And the idea is, if somebody is distracted, then people won't have the mind space to think of what they are doing, and then they will end up making things worse. So as our society is going more and more into the mode of passion and ignorance, overall things are going in a much more destructive direction. So the opposite of ignorance is transcendence. And the more we strive to connect with transcendence, the more we strive to connect with Krishna, the more we can minimize the effects of the four defects. Because we will be able to, not that the imperfection of the senses may still remain, but as I said, our capacity to control will become more and more. We'll at least become more self-aware. And that is how we will be able to protect ourselves. Otherwise, the four defects are always there in human society, and the society today, which is actually, you could say that in today's world, there is a emphasis on, there's an immense increase in passion degenerating toward ignorance. So I write on the Gita every day, a small article. Just yesterday, I wrote an article that, why is it so difficult to focus? Why is it so difficult to concentrate on whatever we are trying to do? Broadly, there are three reasons for that. There is ever increasing distractions. In the past, somebody had to go to watch a movie, they had to go to a movie theater to watch a movie. But now it's just available, not just one movie, any movie that we want, we can have just on our phone, just click it and watch it. And it's not just movies, there are sports, and there are soap operas, and there are 100 things. So it's not just ever increasing distractions, there is ever intensifying competition among ever increasing distractions. So it's not just distraction, there are so many social media nowadays, and every social media wants to catch our attention. So ever increasing competition among ever increasing distractions, and this is for ever decreasing attention spans. So all that is happening is not just external, internally, because of the mode of passion. Not only does the mode of passion provide us more options internally, but the mode of passion also makes our mind more agitated internally. And it's ever, our attention spans are decreasing. So that's why it's so important for us to try to keep ourselves safe, to try to connect ourselves with Krishna. So to the extent we connect ourselves with Krishna, to that extent we stay safe. So I'll conclude with this point, that we need to anchor ourselves in transcendence. Now, we can't always stay in transcendence. We can't even stay usually in goodness, because the sheer pace and nature of our life is such that we can't. But if through our hearing of scripture, through our meditation, through our spirituality, we anchor ourselves in transcendence, then the lower modes are like, in the lower modes, they are like waves. They will they will hit us, but they will still hit us, but they won't sweep us away, because we are anchored. And if we are not anchored, we don't know how far we'll get swept away. Sometimes we may be lucky and we say, I'm not spiritual, and I am not taking my spirituality. Everything is going on nice in my life. Well, that's lucky. That means when we have not held on to the anchor, all that means is a heavy wave didn't come at that time. And that's when a mild wave came and shook us, but we came back. But imagine if we let go of the anchor and we are in the ocean, and that's the time a huge wave comes over there. We will get swept, who knows how far. So by anchoring ourselves in transcendence, we can avoid being victimized by the three modes, avoid victimized by the four defects, and avoid victimized by the six anarthas. This particular pastime, it shows the anartha of ignorance. So we are victimized by three modes, four defects, and six anarthas. So there are a lot of agents out there to victimize us. And if you want to protect ourselves, the anchor of Krishna consciousness is not just vital, but indispensable for us. So I'll summarize what I discussed today. That I discussed broadly three main points in today's class. The first point we continued with about presumptuousness of Sagar's sons in dealing with Kapila Muni, how that led to danger. And humility means that we understand I'm finite and fallible and try to understand the situation. Arrogance means that I'm powerful and clever, and I know what is the problem, I'll fix it. So that is dangerous. It can be destructive. And then we talked about how there are non-conformists, like Asamanjas was, and he was a genius, but he lacked restraint, and it was very messy. So when somebody is a non-conformist, we need to understand why they are like that. So Sagar drove him, exiled him from the kingdom, but then regretted the exile. So if you understand somebody might be non-conformist because they're just too creative, and they may need some constructive distraction to stay engaged. That's why they're not conforming. Or they may just lack discipline. Maybe they need more training, and then maybe they will conform. Or sometimes they're just vicious, and then they just have to be, they're like a bad apple who have to be moved out. But how we deal with non-conformists is important. Otherwise, we will regret losing people with great creativity and energy. And lastly, we talked about how Amshuman, by prayerfully approaching Kapila, was easily able to resolve the issue. And sometimes the first mistake is not as big a problem as the second mistake that we do to cover up the first mistake. So we discussed the three modes, how they affect the effects of the four defects. So in the mode of goodness, the effect of the three defects is minimized because there is a reflection before action. On the mode of passion, it is more, and if we are already good at something, then even if we are not in goodness, we may still do some good because our instincts will come into play. They're like programmed intelligence. But if we are not good at some field and then we try to act without thinking, then we'll be impulsive and that will be destructive. And if you're in ignorance, then it's just illusion. We just can't do anything, no reflection, no action. We completely make a mess of things. So in order to avoid the lower modes from compounding the effect of the three modes, What we need is to anchor ourselves in transcendence. Then when the modes hit us like waves, we will not get swept away. Otherwise, in today's world, there are so many ways in which the waves are coming. There are ever intensifying competition among ever increasing distractions for ever decreasing attention spans. So it's vital for us to anchor ourselves in transcendence. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. So are there any reflections or questions?
Hare Krishna, Chaitanya Charan. It's so amazing how, like, when somebody is an expert, they can see more things than a layman. Similarly, when you present Srimad Bhagavatam, you pick up such relevant topics from the same pastimes, which I might just read, and then go ahead. So I'm so impressed how you pick up relevant topics and also present such wonderful conclusions, which is very helpful for us to reflect upon and try to apply. So thank you very much for yet another amazing class. Krishna, request devotees if they have any reflections or questions.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I'm referring to the part of your talk when you were making distinction between acting on instinct and acting on impulse. So it seems to me that both of them, or neither of them, involve reflection. But instinct, if I'm just trying to confirm my understanding of what you were saying. So although neither of them involve reflection, instinct involves a programmed intelligence, whereas impulse doesn't involve any intelligence. So my question is, that programmed intelligence that's involved in instinct, that could be either innate or acquired expertise, right? Innate from, let's say, maybe from previous life, or acquired expertise in this life. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, of course. Instincts and the programming of the intelligence can be from our past lives. Like some people are already good at certain things. Some people, when they want to say sing a particular tune or play a particular instrument. Some kids, some even small children, they're just so good. They just pick up an instrument and start playing it. But some just can't. So they have to take a lot of training and learn, and then they become good at it. So we could say the instincts may be developed by our karma from previous life, or the instincts can also be developed by our karma from this life. Mm-hmm. So that's how it works. So generally, when you say programmed intelligence, means that it is intelligence that is ingrained within us. Now, program doesn't mean necessarily automatic. It acts as if it's automatic right now, but that doesn't mean it's automatic. It is by effort, by good karma. Good karma means by there's some practice, some training, some effort, and that's how it happened.
Okay.
So I just found this Varnashram is essentially, it's like Brahmanas have good intellectual instincts, Kshatriyas have good managerial instincts, and similarly Vaishyas have good financial instincts. Shudras may have particular artisan instincts in particular area, whatever is the area. So yes, everybody has their instincts.
Yeah, I just found it interesting that, an absence of reflection doesn't necessarily mean an absence of intelligence. I just thought that was a little interesting.
Yeah, I would say that yes, the reflection is required, but if you consider Arjuna who is fighting on a war field, he does reflect to decide, okay, how to counter this particular arrow of this particular enemy. But when the arrows are coming in a stream, he doesn't have a lot of time to reflect. But because he's trained so well, he knows, okay, this arrow will fight this way. So when Bhima and Duryodhana are fighting, they are both very skilled in fighting at mace. And the way they are countering each other moves, both of them are expert. Expertise is one sign of intelligence. So there is that intelligence. But in an actual fight, there's not much time for reflection. Sometimes, say in the tradition, there were debates, intellectual debates would happen between the personalist and the impersonalist. So yes, there will be some amount of reflection, but then there will be, somebody is learned, some question, a person quotes this verse and a person quotes the opposing verse from the opposite side. And so that is, I would say, the greater the expertise, the greater the intelligence becomes a more readily available resource. So the lesser
the less reflection you need.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
So thank you very much. Okay, what is the in the firefighter, on instinct without reflection is very helpful. Yes, if we rush into the fire, yes. And even among firefighters also, there might be a young firefighter who's untrained, and that person rushing into the fire might not be as advisable or might not do as much good at as a person rushing into a fire who is well experienced. So yes, training in one sense, this is also applies to the inner fires within us. See, when we get the fire of desire, the fire of anger rises within us, the fire of envy rises within us. So if we are trained, then in 523 Krishna says that you can tolerate the desires without indulging in them, without succumbing to them. That means not that the more purified we become, that doesn't necessarily mean that the fire of desire doesn't rise within us. The fire of desire may rise, but we will become trained firefighters. And then we will be able to we will be able to deal with the desire effectively. We will not let the fire spread through our consciousness and burn our consciousness completely, or and make us do wrong things. Okay. Thank you, Venkat Prabhu, for that comment. Yes, Athena, you have a question?
Hare Krishna, Chaitanya Charan, Dandavat Pranams. Actually, there was someone before me, Kartik, who had a question first. So I'll let this devotee go first. Thank you.
Yes, please. Sorry, you.
Yeah, thank you, Athena. I just posted my question in the chat. It's a very naive question, perhaps, that we forget everything after death and when we go to the next life. So I wonder, how do our instincts carry over?
Okay, good question. So if you forget everything from our past, how do we carry our instincts from the past? See, there are two kinds of forgetfulness. One is, say, forgetting facts, or it's like more tangible things, forgetting facts, and then there is forgetting skills. So one of my friends is a brain doctor, neurospecialist, and he trains people to recover from amnesia. And I had a fascinating discussion with him, which also applies to, say, previous lives forgetfulness. So he says that a person who has forgotten who has got amnesia, maybe they hit their head or something, they may forget their name, but they know how to drive a car. Now, how does that happen? So it's often in amnesia, it's fascinating what a person has forgotten and what a person remembers. So the facts they have forgotten, but to some extent the skills are still there. So in general, you can say that we have three levels of existence: the soul, the mind, and the body. So when the soul and the mind go from one body to another body, so the things that are related to the body, more and more of those are forgotten. But the things that are imprinted in the mind, they still remain. Now, a person may not remember when they learned it. So if a person had, say, practiced music a lot in their previous life, and they become a great musician. So it's not just some wiring of the brain. It's also impressions on the mind. And in the next life, when they get a next body, those impressions are still there. And then they act accordingly. So that way, if you consider, the subtler the things, the more they get impressed on the mind and the more we carry them with us. If we literally say we forget everything, then why are all children not born as blank slates? Children are not, every child has from their childhood itself a particular nature. Now all children cry, but some children cry as if they are going to bring the whole house down. Some children are in the crib and they are looking out as if, when am I going to take over control of the house? Now that's not necessarily a negative thing. That means maybe they have a more of a Kshatriya nature, who knows? So the point is that as children start growing up, parents, they shape their children, and that is important, shaping them. But parenting can only shape the sculpture. If you consider children to be like a sculpture, they can only shape the sculpture. They can't change the stone that is the sculpture. So every child has their own nature. Where does that nature come from? That comes from a previous life. Now, what does nature mean? Nature means certain psychophysical inclinations, certain interests, certain kinds of desires. So when a person will not remember specific skills. So it's very rare that a newborn baby, even if that person is an English PhD in the previous life, it's not that they will start, their first words will be well articulated English. They'll just cry when a new baby is born. For that matter, even if a person is a great devotee in a previous life, when they're newborn, it's unlikely that they're going to chant the holy names. So there are always biological limitations for the expression of the mental impressions. Just as the person may have been very lusty in their previous lives, but unless the body comes to somewhere near puberty, that lust won't be expressed. So just as there could be limitations for negative expression of the negative impressions from the past, so similarly there can be biological limitations for the expression of the positive impressions also. So certain things may take time. In general, the subtler the things, the more they are impressed on the mind, and because the soul goes to the next body with the mind, so certain tendencies do go ahead. And that's why that's our explanation, our philosophical explanation for the existence of prodigies. Some kids, they have such phenomenal talent. Somebody like a math whiz kid, somebody like a computer whiz kid, somebody is great at sports. They're outstanding talent. So that's not a part of the conscious memory of the person. So what is lost at death or in the process of transmigration from one death to the next birth is the conscious memory. Almost entirely the conscious memory is wiped out for most people. There are rare exceptions where a few people may remember some things from their past lives. The conscious memory is wiped away, but the subconscious memory with the impressions within them, that still remains, and that shapes the starting point of the person in the next life. Okay, does it answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, shall we stop here? So that question was by Karthik, or was that a question by Athena?
That was a question by Karthik Prabhu. If you have time, we can take Athena's question also.
Yes, please. You can, Athena.
Okay.
Oh, are you sure that's... Thank you. I guess this was a little bit of a tangential question, and since you're such an expert on the mind and analyzed it so much, I found it interesting that you mentioned the student who needed to actively engage his mind in video games in order to focus in class, and you had explained it as intelligence, an increased intelligence than the average person, but and then at the end, you had mentioned the reason why we're having a very difficult time to even focus is actually increasing distractions, which you would say it was a non-conformist distraction, which helps him focus. But I was curious about the mind because I think your psychologist today mentioned that the mind actually only has the ability to focus on one thing. So multitasking is actually not not good. And your mind isn't actually multitasking. Your mind is just doing very, very quick switches from one thing to another, that perhaps it's so fast you maybe can't notice, but you've missed that 1 second. And that's why, for example, if you're listening to a lecture and you're eating, you're not doing either very well. You're missing parts when you're listening, and you're not enjoying the full taste of the food that you are eating at the same time. But I just found this interesting, because 2 parts, if you have an explanation. I know in a higher level of chanting, you're supposed to be able to hear the holy name, focus on the chanting, the sound, yet be able to see the deities in your mind or the pastimes. And I've tried that, and I'm not so elevated where I can only, my mind will switch. If I am seeing Radha Muladhara and Gaurachandra in my mind, I'm not able to hear or put 100% attention to the holy name. And then if I hear the holy name, then I'm really not, my mind needs to switch in order to do that. But however, and maybe I'm just not expert at it, and I'm not sure if it's just an element of the mind or just training it in that aspect. But this goes back to the mind not being able to multitask, and actually only it's a fast switching. And I'm not sure if that's happening to the student who's just of a higher level intelligence. But I'm also curious because when I can do, there's specific meditations that I do, and certain types of healing where I'm able to hold a specific object or a person's body part in my mind, but then there will be thoughts coming in, and the body part of the object does not disappear. It holds very, very steady in my mind space, but somehow a thought can come through. So how is that possible? I guess I'm just wondering, I'm like, wow, this is actually just still steady held. It doesn't flicker, but yet a thought can come through simultaneously. So I personally don't think my mind is switching. But anyways, I don't know if you have any explanation for those phenomena and everything that I kind of put out there. I'm sorry if this is a very elementary question. Thank you so much.
Well, definitely this is not an elementary question. It's an important question, and it's a complicated question. So when we multitask, are we basically switching? And that's why we are missing things. And that's why multitasking is not good. But when we are chanting the holy name purely, we are hearing the holy name and also meditating on Krishna's satshangs. Is that multitasking? And sometimes we seem to be able to multitask, and we don't seem to be switching. See, somehow I find that it is not very advisable to absolutize anything in the material domain. In the material domain, there's a lot of variety in different people. So let's talk first. That means each person is different. And some people, so if you want to say that if we are multitasking, we are missing. Well, we are always missing things. See, our eyes blink constantly. We don't even notice that they're blinking. So during the time of blinking, are we missing something? Yes, we are missing. But our eyes have been designed in such a way that we don't miss what we miss. That means it's not consequential. It's not very significant what we miss. So similarly, say in Kirtan, if somebody is playing kartal and singing, are they not multitasking? So should we make just because we can't multitask and we are going to miss things out, therefore should we henceforth make a rule that anybody who's singing, they should not touch a musical instrument, and anybody who's touching a musical instrument, they should not sing? When we do Kirtan, we are dancing and we are singing. Isn't that multitasking? We are moving our hands, we are singing. So, this the bad press that multitasking is given, I find that it is unfair. It's, yes, we all are shifting our attention, but that's what we are doing constantly. See, right now, you are hearing what I'm speaking, you are seeing what right now, you may be seeing how I'm looking or what I'm doing. But at the same time, among all our senses, it's only the eyes that we have control over, and we can switch them off. We can't switch out of our nose. We can't close our nose unless we forcibly do that. We can't close our ears. We can't shut off our touch. So there's sensory information coming from all these senses right now. So now if you're in a room and say if I'm in the room right now and I hear some noise behind me when I'm speaking. Now, unless that noise is very disruptive, I notice it, but it doesn't register on me. So while noticing, did my attention go over there? Now, yes, it did. But was that a note to, if I spend time on that, thought, what is it? Who is coming? What is that noise? Then maybe I would get distracted. So you could say that way that there are that distraction or interruption in attention or switching becomes a problem only when it is not fast enough. Otherwise, our mind, we can't survive without switching. Our mind is taking an input from all the senses, and then we are deciding, okay, we take an input from various senses. I hear a sound, I maybe get a smell, then I see something, and I decide which sensory input am I going to focus on. So we are always multitasking. So now, of course, we don't think of this as multitasking. When we talk about multitasking, is not just taking in sensory information, but usually we talk about multitasking as multiple sensory engagement. But that also we do frequently. Say somebody is driving a car. Now, should they never hear a class while driving a car? Should they never talk with anyone while driving a car? Now, it depends. Especially if somebody is learning a car driving new, then they need more attention over there. And if they start chatting with someone, they could be a risk to themselves and to others. But somebody is a seasoned driver, they can talk while driving. Are they multitasking? Yes. Now, for most devotees, if they don't hear classes while say going to work or something, maybe they will never get time to hear classes. So, you know, we can't, I don't appreciate this, like a constant giving a bad press to multitasking. Having said that, you know, we all have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to check when multitasking is leading to such a significant switch in a significant time lag in switching that we are losing attention, that we are losing valuable things. And based on that, we have to decide. So that is an individual decision. And some people have a capacity to do a lot of things. And unless they're doing a lot of things, they just don't feel like they're doing something. Like if somebody has a capacity to lift a 50 kg weight, and they go to a gym and they're given 5 kg to lift, they'll be bored to death. What am I doing wasting my time over here? So just as we understand this in terms of physical capacities, the same can apply to intellectual capacities or cognitive capacities. Some people have far greater cognitive capacities than others, and then they may be able to multitask better than others. So now, is it multitasking when we're chanting and at the same time we are said to remember Krishna or see Krishna's form? I don't know whether we can literally apply psychological conceptions from the material domain to the spiritual domain. Why not? Because there is a unity, there is an integrity in Krishna. So Krishna's name is non-different from Krishna's form. Right now, when our consciousness is not transcendental, it is one leads to the other. So this is Krishna's name, this is Krishna's form. And maybe Krishna's name reminds me of Krishna's form, maybe Krishna's form reminds me of Krishna's name. So in that sense, we would say, okay, we are going from A to B and from B to A, and that is some kind of multitasking. But at a spiritual level, when we realize the non-difference between Krishna's name and Krishna himself, then I would hesitate to call it multitasking, because it just applying a material framework where it may not be applicable. But during chanting, you know, we may be told that just focus on the holy name. But some devotees find it helpful when they keep a picture of maybe their spiritual master, keep a picture of Krishna, maybe have Tulsi Maharani in front of them. So maybe that helps them in chanting. So if they do that, are they multitasking? No, they're just trying to increase absorption. So rather than whether a person is single tasking or a person is multitasking, you could focus on how much absorption a person is having. So a person with a high intellectual capacity, they need sufficient substance to engage their intelligence. And if just one class is going on at a mediocre intellectual level, they don't have enough substance. And then instead of letting wander all over the universe, if they create some constructive channel for engaging the rest of their intelligence, then their intelligence is partially available here and the rest of intelligence is available there. So that's why I started by saying that best not to absolutize anything in the material world, but to recognize that each person is an individual and each individual needs to find out how best they can absorb themselves in doing whatever they're doing most effectively. Okay. So thank you very much. Hope that answers the question, Athena. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for your presence.
Mantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila
Is
Prabhupada.
Chaitanya Charan Prabhu ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.